What's up, guys? Welcome back to Fireside with Fathers. For those of you who are new, which I know there are a couple new here, they've been asking what the deal is with Fireside with Fathers. It's basically an initiative that we've been doing at our house physically, like with people together in close quarters. And that obviously stopped after the lockdown. And due to requests from the boys, so it came from the boys, they wanted to keep doing Fireside with Fathers. And so we've just launched it online. And it's basically the original idea was is that university guys would come to our house, we'd have pizza, prayer time, and then someone would give a testimony. It usually was the majority were testimony stories to get the guys kind of pumped up for their faith, and in a lot of cases it made their faith more relevant to like their everyday situations, why we live our faith. And we've been carrying it on every Wednesday since lockdown, and it's been absolutely fruitful and beautiful, thanks be to God. I will announce it now, and at the end it will be changing the day. There's also been requests from the guys in the States if we can change Fireside with Fathers to Saturday. I'm sorry, to Monday. To Monday. That's why we'll say it twice. We'll say it twice at the beginning and the end. It's gonna go to Monday at 8:15. Is gonna be Fireside with Fathers from here on out. Monday at 8:15, and that is Irish time. So, like I said, hopefully the boys will remind me at the end. We'll clip it with that as well. And today, I want to introduce Mike DeVault. I just found out about Mike last week. The two brothers here, brother Ben and father Renee, know him personally from our summer camps. He was involved with the Home of the Mother summer camp last summer, and just pulling a little bit on his story, which you can find it online actually. It's called Changing Tracks. This guy was living the American dream, which for me, it's beautiful and surprising that he was living the American dream and somehow woke up to find out that that dream can actually be a nightmare if God's not in the picture. Because you can get everything you want, and you can even be moving up and getting more. But if you don't have God in your life, it just becomes emptier and emptier, and you're filling yourself up with lots of things, but you're missing the one important thing. So this is Mike DeVault, and I'm just gonna hand it over to you, Mike, and feel free. It's all yours. So you can just go ahead and give us your story.
All right. Thank you so much for having me. Good to meet you guys. I do know, like you said, I do know Father Renee and Brother Ben, but I've not met you in person yet. So hopefully someday soon,
maybe a trip up to Ireland.
Well,
So yeah, basically, I guess I'll start from the beginning. I was born here in the United States. I was born in the Midwest in Wisconsin, of all places, and that's where my dad's from. My mom is from Spain, so a little bit of you can maybe start to figure out how I came to know the home, but it had more to do with Our Lady than with with me or Spain. But um, as a youngster, I mean, I was born in the very early beginning of the 70s, and I grew up in the 70s and 80s, which I mean was just an awesome time to be a kid, right? Like Star Wars was coming out, like the coolest toys in the world were, you know, Star Wars figures and Saturday morning cartoons. So I was pretty much the sugar cereal Saturday morning cartoons kid who you know, watched TV, wanted all the toys, got pretty much what he wanted. I got two other brothers. I'm the oldest, and we pretty much grew up just a typical American life. We actually grew up outside of Chicago in a suburb and called Aurora, and yeah, lived in a, you know, two-story house in a subdivision, and we were Catholic. We were all baptized Catholic, and I don't know that I would say, well, we practiced our faith in the sense that we went to mass on Sundays, and we went to Catholic school while we lived in Aurora. So it was, you know, I don't know exactly how to say. what my Catholic upbringing was like, but it was probably pretty typical to anybody who lived those years of like the 70s or 80s, just pretty surface level, not really understanding a whole lot. Uh, I wasn't really keen to learn too much, to be honest with you, or be bothered. But it's pretty much the sort of the kiddie Catholicism, I guess, if you want to call it that. And so what ended up happening was that there was my dad's was an air traffic controller, and in the 80s they had a strike, and all the air traffic controllers in the country, and then they ended up getting all fired, and we ended up moving to Spain. So it was interesting. I only add that into the story here because Spain's sort of a big part of my life, and it was kind of there where I first started to see people who really practiced their faith, or who knew anything about Catholicism, and that was probably my grandparents on my mom's side, and my mom's aunts and uncles, who were uh, older at that point, but they, I think, sort of instilled a little bit of a seed into me at an early age, even though I would go pretty far off the rails. But even to this day, I kind of remember some of the things that they would do when they would get in their car before they would leave. They'd always make the sign of the cross and say a quick prayer. So the little things that stick with you. But long story short, I made it. I did some schooling in Spain. We lived in Spain for about 6 years on and off. We ended up moving back to the States and then back to Spain. So I did some grade school in Spain, and then came back and started high school in the United States, and then ended up going back to Spain to do a couple of years of high school, and then back to the United States for senior year of high school and college. So when I finally did make it back to the United States for my senior year of high school, my parents were not with me because they were still in Spain, and the idea was that they were going to move back at some point, but they had some business ends to tie up. So in order to get my senior year underway, I made the trek over. Long story short, they didn't end up moving to the same place that I moved to. So I got going my senior year, and they moved to Florida, and I was in Wisconsin. But I don't know that I would say that was a huge part of like me going off the rails, so to speak. I wasn't really close to the Lord, even anytime through my high school years. I don't know if my parents ever watched this; they might be hearing this for the first time. But I think when I was in high school in Spain, we would tell them that we would go to mass, and then me and my brothers and I would just walk straight past the church and go to the arcade for an hour and a half. So it was, I was not doing the right thing from before I had sort of left my family to come back to the United States. But when I went off to college, I went to the University of Wisconsin, Stevens Point, smack in the middle, and didn't really know what I wanted to study. I just was kind of going because that's what everybody said you needed to do. Like you got to go to college. So I thought, okay, I'll go to college, and I picked a major that I kind of thought was interesting. Had nothing to do, well, I guess had some similarities to what I would do later on down the road in my profession, but it was architectural design is what I studied. So yeah, it was, anybody who's been to college in the United States will probably know that it's a difficult place to stay on track. It's somewhat easy to get through curriculum and grades wise, but there's a lot of distractions with parties and with drinking, and I fell into all of that when I was in college. Didn't have a very close support system, and a lot of my friends from high school ended up just coming to the same college, and we ended up staying in the same dorm. So it was pretty much just pick up where we left off. So I wouldn't say that, you know, a whole lot of good came out of my college. I mean, I do have some close friends that came out of there, but yeah. And again, like I wasn't going to mass. I wasn't practicing my faith at all during those times. I don't even would say that I would ever have thought to go to mass, or it would have never entered my mind, essentially. I will say this, one thing that I still did for whatever reason. I think this is kind of like part of, you know, the things that you grasp onto as a kid and you kind of carry through your life, is that I would still say a night prayer before I went to bed. I would say an Our Father, a Hail Mary, and a Glory Be. I don't exactly know why I did that, but I would. If I think back to, I always had like, I don't know, I'm not sure that I understood what my relationship with God was. I guess I kind of saw God maybe as like the deists see God. I think I'm getting it right. The deists, they just think that God just created the world and then kind of walked away and he just left us to our own devices and we just believe what we want to believe. I probably was something along those lines. Just didn't really understand my faith at all. Didn't understand who Jesus was. But getting back to what my point was, I did sort of have an affinity for Our Lady, in the sense that, I don't know, I felt like I could I had a little bit of a bond, and not that I was trying to nurture that bond or anything, but when I would think of her, when somebody would bring her up, I would always just have like a soft spot for her. So, you know, I hadn't thought about that in many years until just right now, but probably it was that relationship with her that helped to start like pull me out. So I'll continue on then. After college, I did graduate, and it was a bit of a struggle. Things got so bad with me that I actually had to take, like in the middle of one semester, I had to leave school and take the rest of the semester off. Like the partying had got really, really bad, and my grades had suffered quite a bit. And so I came back to Florida and sort of just chilled with my parents and my family and kind of sort of tried to get my head back on straight. And then after I graduated, I actually ended up moving back to the town that I grew up in Illinois, outside of Chicago. That is how I didn't necessarily meet my wife there, because we had met many, many years ago. I went to Catholic grade school with her brother, so we had known each other. But that was where we. Sorry, there's a wasp next to me, but sort of where we got to know each other again. And I'll sort of breeze through this next part, but she's Catholic. I went to the Catholic grade school with her brother. And so I've known her family forever. And we ended up getting married, and then we moved to Wisconsin. I did some work in like designing homes, and we were just newlyweds. So we just were trying to figure things out, weren't going to mass, weren't really practicing our faith at all. And then one time when we were down here, I think for my brother's wedding, we decided that we had had enough of the cold and of Wisconsin. We were going to move to Florida. And that's where everything sort of, career-wise for me started to pick up pretty heavily. It was in 2001, I think, right in the beginning of 2001. I remember we drove down on Super Bowl Sunday. So I guess that would have been at the end of January. And then let's see, let me get my bearings straight. Yeah, my brother was living in Orlando, and we decided we were going to move to Orlando. I'm not exactly sure why, but we did. But when I was young and through college and through high school, I always loved video games, just like I'm sure you all do. And I can't even tell you how many hours. When in part of growing up in the 70s that was sort of when the early 70s, when Atari and all video games kind of started coming into their own, as like you can own these things and have them at your house. So it was just endless hours playing video games as a kid and through high school, wasting time doing that. And then when I got out of college and got married, I still love to play them. I'd play them on the weekends. And when I moved to Florida, I had done a little research before we moved to Orlando, and had realized that Electronic Arts had a studio here in Orlando. And I thought, oh, that would be kind of interesting to look at, maybe getting a part-time job there while I look, for something in the architecture field. And I don't know, I would say probably within a month and a half of moving down here, I had submitted a resume to be a part-time tester of video games. So basically what it sounds like, you play video games and you try to find bugs and other glitches with the game. And I got hired right away. A lot of times they get college kids that are there for the summer, or they get folks that haven't gone to college. So if you went there at that time, things have drastically changed now in that industry, but at that time, 20 years ago, if you went there and you had a college degree and you could dress yourself, you pretty much were going to get a job. So as soon as I walked into that place, I thought, like, for me, that was where I needed to be. And I pretty much sold out my entire life to getting a full-time job there. As a tester, I would work as many hours as they asked me to. I would do whatever they wanted. I would sleep on the sofa, slept there many times. And mind you, I was already married at the time. So like, I was not really, giving my relationship in my marriage any sort, it was becoming second fiddle to me, below my job. And, I apologize to my wife for that, but it was, it was partially what I thought I needed to do to provide. But at the same time, if I look, if I have to be honest with myself, it was very selfish in that this was what I wanted to do. This was my career, and this is what I thought was going to bring me, whatever mild prestige you get from working in that industry, and whatever money it brought. That was what I was chasing more than anything. So I was testing the games. First game I tested was an NCAA football game, and on PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox, and it was cool. It was just sitting around in a room, a big huge room with a bunch of other guys, for 18 hours a day, testing games, running through these different spreadsheets that they want you to check to make sure all the stadium intros are correct, and any myriad of other things. So and I just worked my tail off, and basically by the end of that year had been promoted to a full-time tester, now on payroll full-time with benefits, and then worked my way up within that next year to a lead tester. So now I had a desk, which was in a cubicle. Looking back on it, pretty pathetic, but it's like, hey, you're like longing to have this like cage to sit in. But I had a PC, and I was like one of the leaders of the test team. So that was pretty cool. And but again, very, very long hours. There's portions of the year, like 3-month stretches, that you were working 18 to 20 hours. Sometimes you just weren't going home. So it got pretty hectic when the game was getting ready to ship to the public. But again, during all that time, like, my job was pretty much my God. It was like what I lived for. It was everything I poured my heart and soul into, and I was rising fairly quickly through promotions. I would say within by 2002, middle of 2000, I'm sorry, 2003, I got promoted to an actual development team as an assistant producer on the NASCAR video game, which was my favorite game. I love racing. I love Formula One. I love NASCAR. I love any kind of like car racing. Probably growing up in the 70s watching too much Smokey and the Bandit and things like that. But I loved I still love cars, but which was, you know, one of the sort of secular benefits of my job is that it started to pay well really quickly. And then as the salary went up, it was like my desires for different things started, you know, getting greater and greater. I started feeding just these desires that I had for things that I never had before as a kid, or as, you know, even a struggling adult just out of college. And it was like, ooh, no, you know, you got cash now. And, you know, I just would buy tech and cars. Cars were a big thing for me. Like I wanted to have a powerful car and a cool car. So they just became disordered desires, and that didn't really stop until, you know, till I came back to the Lord, which we'll get to soon. But anyway, I was just continuing to work hard. Even as an assistant producer, there's times when, you know, you're still working overnight. You're working till 2, 3 in the morning. You get in at 10. You work till 2 or 3. Go home. You sleep a few hours, and you come home, or you come back to work. And again, wasn't, you know, even throughout that whole time of working my way up, I was not, you know, interested in. I would say I grew just further and further away from the Lord. I would tell you that I didn't think about God or Jesus or Our Lady in those years at all, unless it was maybe Christmas or Easter and I was going to mass then. But it was like 2 times a year I would go to mass, and the rest of the time I would pretty much try to avoid it like the plague. Most of the time I was, you know, if times were busy at work, I was working. So but through 2003 to 2010, I had managed to work my way up to the position of the lead designer on the NASCAR game. And then when we lost the NASCAR license, I got moved over to the Tiger Woods golf game, and I worked on that game for another, I guess it would be 6 or 7 years. 5 or 6 years, but until the end of 2014 was when I left EA. And you know, it was interesting. You know, now looking back on it, it's hard to explain this to anybody, how you would get just disenchanted working in this industry. I mean, just like anything else, it becomes a job after a certain amount of time. It was still kind of fun, but the deeper you get into it and the higher you grow up the ranks, the less sort of fun stuff you're doing, and you're more just working with execs and things like that. But it was still fairly rewarding, but it got to a point where I don't know, I started to question what it was that I was doing and like where this was all going. It seemed like every time I got a promotion, and they were coming like once or twice a year, I was getting promoted, at least once a year, that I would be really happy for a 2-week to a month period of time. I'd think, this is it, perfect. Like, this is the promotion that I wanted. I'm happy here. Like, I can just ride off into the sunset and I'm happy. And then, you know, it would be a couple weeks to a month, and then that feeling would start creeping in. Like, you'd start looking at like, well, what's the next promotion? What's next on, you know, what's the next thing to do? Like this, okay, this has already gotten old. Because normally before you get the promotion, you're doing the bulk of the work for that role anyway before they end up promoting you. So you're like, okay, well, now it's time to move on to the next one, thinking that that's the one that's really going to make me happy. Like the next promotion is going to be the one, and then after that, I'll be all set, and I'll be that's all I really need in life. And for me, it was kind of the same for everything. It was the next car, houses I wasn't into, so like I was happy with my house, but TVs, video games, you name it, any kind of material thing. It was like, as long as I have that, then that's the thing that I want, and that's what's going to make me happy. But definitely the promotions and the job was sort of like in the first place where I was like, fixated on. And I don't know, I would say it was probably around the year 2000 and maybe 2011. I would say I was already on Tiger Woods, and I had just obtained like the promotion that I thought was going to be the end all promotion for me. That was going to be, once I get this, it's going to solve all my problems and end all my worries and put my heart at ease. And it was creative director. So I gotten that promotion. And then, I would say that one more than any of them, within, a short period of time, I started none of sort of the unhappiness or the disenchantment, I guess, that I was starting to feel was starting to go away. Because by then, I had started to think, what am I really doing here? I'm spending all this time, we're making these games, this industry is getting really huge, and what am I producing for society besides just some, basically some cheap thrills, and some, some fairly addicting features. But, that all said, my talk and my testimony isn't really trying to get people to stop playing video games. Like they have a place, but it's just, for me, it had become like a disordered obsession. First in my youth playing them, and then B in my adult life, with a career in that space. But so yeah, when I got the role of creative director, I still wasn't really fulfilled. It wasn't fulfilling. In fact, I think by that time, in those last 3 years that I was there, between 2011 and 2014, I just started to become more and more unhappy with what I was doing. With now looking back, I can tell that the Lord was just like tapping me on the shoulder, being like, "Hey, Mike, it's time to look somewhere else for happiness in your life." But at that point, I wasn't still was not going to mass, wasn't practicing my faith. In fact, until it was getting worse. In those respects, it was getting much worse. But now it almost makes me choke up at times to think how patient the Lord is, from when he would start to tap you on the shoulder back 10 years ago, to when you finally say, "Okay, Lord, I'm taking all the masks and all the the exterior armor off, and you do with me what you will." Like how patient he is. But anyway, getting back to the games bit, by the year 2014, again, I was just not happy at all. Had talked to my wife on several occasions about leaving EA, but then it's like that little thing inside you is like, "Really, you're gonna leave your dream job?" Now I know who was that saying those sorts of things. But lo and behold, some guys who had left EA actually had gone to work for another game company called Zynga. They make Words with Friends and Farmville and mobile games. So they had started up a studio in Orlando, and I thought, you know what, that's what I need to do. I need to leave EA, and I need to work on some mobile games, because it's a different space, it's a change of environment, it's a different set of challenges. that's, I've just been at EA too long, and I need to move on. So went to Zynga. That didn't help. Basically, what ended up happening was the Lord sort of I think he got impatient with me, and he ratcheted up the screws a little bit, because within 6 months of me joining the crew at Zynga, they shut down the studio. And then, I wasn't hearing the Lord knocking. And then that same group of guys, we went to another company called FanDuel, and they basically took over our whole group. And then within another 6 months, they shut down that studio. So at that point, I was sort of faced with the dilemma that, and like the fear that I had more than any other fear, like never did I fear offending the Lord, or losing my soul or anything like that, but it was losing my job. Like, what would I do if I lost my job, and now I'm like disgraced and not in the industry anymore? Well, that ended up happening. We all got laid off, and I went home for basically, I don't know, 4 months. Luckily, my wife still had her job. And it was at that time when I was just at home, alone, and would sit around and with nothing really to do, that the Lord was like, now's the time. And it was actually right. And this is how bad it had gotten for me. Like, even up until that point, I had gotten to like a point where, like, the lowest point in my faith, where my daughters, probably right about that age that you're seeing there now, it was time for her first communion. And luckily, thanks to our Lord and Our Lady, my wife had still been sane enough and close enough to the Lord that she always said, okay, we need to get our daughter Anna, we need to get her baptized. And because it was up to me, she probably just it would have never happened. Like, it was just so off my radar that it would have not happened. And then it came first communion time. And this is, around the year 2017 now. So not too long ago. It was 2016, somewhere between 16 and 17. And I remember talking to my wife. We were walking down the sidewalk, and we were talking about her first communion. I was like, I don't know, let's let her be whatever she wants to be. If she wants to like go to the Presbyterian church here, let her do that, or like whatever, let her grow up and pick her own faith. And I think probably that was the sort of thing to come out of my mouth that sent the Lord over the edge, because it was during that time, luckily, thank you to the Lord, we decided to have her, receive her first communion. And it was right in that time during the sacrament of her receiving the Holy Eucharist that my change came, because the weekend that she had her first communion, my parents had come up, obviously, to celebrate. And then my mom, that time, I think I was kind of starting to, have a slight conversion. I started to pray a little bit more, probably more selfishly than for anything else. Like, Lord, please find me a job, and like, please let me go back to EA. At that point, I was like desperately trying to get my job back, or any kind of job. So anyway, when my parents came up for the first communion, my mom gave me this book, and I thought, I'll read the book. I don't have anything else to do. I'll hang out outside on a bench and read it. And it was a book about purgatory, about the souls in purgatory. And I don't know, it's not like a book that is written by any of the church fathers or anything like that. So it's not, I wouldn't say that it's doctrinally even, it's probably hitting on, correct teaching from the church, but it's from an elderly lady, I think, who lived, close to Medjugorje. And she would talk to the souls in purgatory. And it wasn't really, the content of the book was hitting me, but it was just, I don't know, I could feel just like layers of myself coming away And I just remember thinking, what if I died tomorrow? Like, am I ready? Like, if I had to stand in front of the Lord, like, what would I say to him? What could I show him? Like, how have I served? What have I done? And started to have like those feelings that I would have when I was getting disenchanted with video game development, but like on a infinite scale now. So like that's where I can say that it was the Lord tapping me on the shoulder all those years previously, because the feeling was the same, but now it was just like almost like I would want to start crying because of how much I had offended the Lord all those years. But anyway, so that was sort of like the turning point. And then I started reading some other books, like some books in the Diary of Saint Faustina, and I started reading books about consecrations to Our Lady. And then just sort of, really, the internet's full of great resources like this one that the brothers have. But I just started realizing, as I started kind of like, I'm gonna learn more about my faith, because this stuff's kind of interesting. Like the whole thing about purgatory, I thought that, I don't know, I'd never been really told anything about that. I mean, I kind of knew that it existed, but I thought it was just a complete and utter negative. But then I just started sort of diving head first. I didn't have anything else to do. I was still applying for jobs. And I thought, wow, what if I went to mass like in the morning? So one day I went to daily mass, and I was like, oh, that was really short. That's kind of cool. And I just remember all those days. I remember thinking, oh, well, I'll go to daily mass today, Lord, and like maybe a couple of times this week. But pretty soon I'm going to have my job back at EA or somewhere else, and I won't be able to go to daily mass. I'm sorry, it won't happen. And that was like 6 years ago, and I just got back from daily mass this morning. So it's funny how that works. But basically, what happened was I kept trying to learn more about the faith, trying to get close to our Lord. The more I started going to mass, the more I was just having like these moments of conversion during the mass, where I would just, I just start crying and just start bawling, and just thinking about how the Lord had, it was many things going through my mind and my soul at that moment, but the sheer graces that he was showering on me, I had never felt anything like that before. So I hadn't gone to confession probably in, I would say maybe between 35 and 40 years. And one of the times I went to daily mass, I don't know, one of the priests that was there, for whatever reason, I felt sort of like a comfort level with him, because to be quite honest with you, and I'm sorry, Father Luke and Father Renee, but that was another thing. Like I had just a complete disdain for priests. I thought, they're just dudes who never made it in life. They're just, burnouts who couldn't get girls, or didn't fit into the party scene, and this is the only thing they had left to do. And so I apologize for that. Now some of my favorite friends are priests, and like including these gentlemen here, and our beloved Father Henry. So anyway, I had this, I thought, okay, I'm just going to go and have a confession with this priest after mass. So I grabbed him after mass in narthex, and I'm like, do you have time for a confession, Father? And he's like, yeah, of course. And it was like a 2.5 hour confession. It was just like, I went in there, actually, funny story, I was actually going to leave the mass, and I thought, oh, you know what, I'll just catch him the next week. And then I was literally like walking out of the church, and it was almost like somebody grabbed me by the shirt and was like, no, why don't you go now? And I went and had this like a general confession, basically, and everything just came out. And it was almost like I was not even speaking the things that I was speaking, because they were just coming out. And then at the end, like, again, I don't know how this came out of my mouth, but it's like, well, maybe we could meet again next week, Father. And it was like, but it was like my intellect and my will had finally kind of clicked together, and now like I wanted to learn more, and anything where I sort of found where I could go deeper into the faith, I sort of started attacking it like I attacked my career. And but it felt like something completely different. It felt like the paths were just opening up for me the more that I learned, and the more that I went to mass. So another interesting story was that when I started doing this, the attacks didn't stop from uh from the evil one. But basically what happened was I had gotten to a point where I had some really great prospects for employment. A couple of them were back at Electronic Arts, and one of them again was with Zynga. And they had gotten to the point where I thought, okay, well, these are going to happen. Like, I'm going to probably be able to pick from one of the three. So, here we go, Lord. Thank you for your help. But it's time for this guy to go back to work. And I remember it was my birthday, and I was sitting around just waiting for these companies to call. And they all called that day or emailed, telling me that I was no longer in the running for the jobs. All three of them on the same day, and it was my birthday. And at that point, it was just like, I felt like the whole world came crashing down on top of me. And I remember when my wife got home from work and my daughter was home, talk to them, like I just felt like this blackness inside of me. I just felt like, and I could hear these sort of like, I don't know, not voices, like I don't hear voices in my head, but I just felt like something saying to me like, okay, see what happened? You started getting close to the Lord. Like, he didn't help you. You started going back to daily mass. Like, what good did that do you? And I just remember at one point I told my wife, I'm like, just let me lay here on the bed and close my eyes. And I just want to talk to anybody for the rest of the night, see maybe. And I just remember laying there I just wanted to like tear things to pieces, and just black. I just remember feeling like it was just like a darkness inside. And all of a sudden I had like this calm come over me, and like I like all those what I was hearing about, like you going back to mass, like what good did that come? Like nothing really, you did that all for nothing. Like all of a sudden I heard like something else, and it was like, don't listen to that. And then like all the darkness and like the pain, it was like it all kind of almost drained out of my feet. It was like the weirdest thing I've ever felt in my life. And I don't know, for me it was like when I think about Our Lady and sort of like the warmth that I feel when I think about her, it was that same sense. I think that she was basically helping me through that particular time. And after that, not that I haven't had struggles or had sort of low points, but I know where to turn. And basically it wasn't long after that time that lo and behold, we were in Miami, and I went to a shrine to mass, and there were these sisters in the back, and the mass was in Spanish, and there's all these nuns in the back, and they're all dressed in white. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I've never seen sisters that look like that. And because when I was in grade school, in Catholic school, they were like very different sisters. You didn't see them smile a lot, but so during the mass, the priest said, oh, these sisters are from Spain. And I was like, wait, what? These sisters are from Spain and they're here at this mass at this little church in Miami. So I thought, that's it. I need to meet them. By that point, I was all in. I was starting to really try to learn about my faith, and I was trying to do, what I thought the Lord was calling me to do. And by that point, after the thing with the 3 jobs fell through, I said, Lord, I'm not going to set any expectations about anything. whatever you want me to do, put it in front of me. I'll pray about it. If it stays there, I'll pursue it. If it's according to your will, I'll do it. If it's in line with what the Lord wants, then I'll pursue it. And so that was the right thing to say for my faith. But in terms of work, that was probably the wrong thing to say, because I had spotty work. But in terms of my faith life, it just shot out like a rocket. And meeting the sisters that day was so providential, because if it wasn't for that meeting, I wouldn't be on this call, and I would have still continued to pursue my faith and go deeper. But what the home has done has just helped to really to sort of help guide it in a very real way. So I'm very thankful to the Lord to have brought me in contact with the home. But yeah, after that, essentially, on my birthday, where I lost those 3 jobs, they're probably never mine to begin with, but everything pretty much changed. And still going to daily mass. I finally got confirmed, shortly thereafter. I'd never been confirmed. And just started getting more involved, like just asking the Lord for opportunities to serve. When I just found that when the Lord gave me an opportunity to serve him in any way, whether it was, helping out with the youth group, or, helping out at a summer camp for the home, or just, whatever it was, that the graces that I got from that were just, overflowing. So, I still ask the Lord to let me serve in any way. And really, we've never hurt for cash. We've never hurt for money. We live in a great little town in just across the street from Disney World, and in a beautiful home that I always tell Our Lady belongs to her, because whatever's for the glory of her Son, that's what this house is for. So and if it wasn't for her, our Lord, we wouldn't be living here. But I always thought it was just a myth that the Lord can't be done in generosity, but it's just through living by letting go and surrendering to him that I found that that's the case. So, I don't know how old you guys are who are listening to this talk, but if you're in college or just about to go to college, I can tell you that I'm living proof that don't let the world get its hooks into you, because it's relentless and it does not forgive. It is not a forgiving place. Not to say that you don't have to provide for your family, or have money to survive, but always do it with the Lord. And it's still something that I struggle with, keeping in the front of my mind. I think I've gotten a little better at it, is just making every decision that you make in your life, just getting used to praying about it and sitting with our Lord. If you can't go to adoration right now, to sit in the chapel, and if you can't do that, to pray a rosary, or just to sit there quietly and just to listen. That's something that I still struggle to do, is just to shut up and listen to the Lord. But that's pretty much it. After I guess I can kind of recap where I am now. I still do work for the video game industry. I basically have my own contracting company, and I have a couple of clients. I sort of pick and choose clients that I think have good business practices. That was sort of one thing that I did leave out. Maybe if we have time for another one of these, we can go a little bit more in depth into sort of like some of the mechanics that the video game companies use to hook you. That would take like another couple hours, but those are sort of some of the things I started seeing in the industry that were making me not really like it too much anymore. But so back to where I am now, I try to pick working for companies that don't really employ those sorts of methods too much, and I just try to keep it in check. But the more and more I've surrendered to the Lord and told him, do with me what you will, he has started to steer me more into working for him. So now I actually recently got hired on by our parish as the youth minister and the assistant religious education director, or assistant to the religious education director. So, I just try to be patient with the Lord the way he was patient with me. And I say, listen, I'm here for the long haul. So I got all day. You take your time. I'll do whatever you want. And you just put it in front of me and we'll pray about it. And if it stays there, we keep going. So that's, I guess if I could give you some advice, it would be, that just keep the Lord in all your decisions and stay close to the home. They are a great, it's easy to find, I don't know what the right word is, Catholicism, I guess, that is, on really radical on one spectrum or the other, whether it's, ultra traditionalists or ultra liberals. The home has always been to me like just faithful to the church, just faithful to what the church teaches. And actually, I've started to learn that now because I'm also a student. Last 2 years ago, I entered into the theology program at Franciscan University. So I'm working on getting my master's there. And the more I've learned really was just to go to learn more about, seek understanding of the faith. And I thought, well, as long as I'm paying for these classes, I guess I'll get a piece of paper too. But the more I learned about my faith, the more I realized I valued the home and how faithful they are to the tradition and the magisterium of the church in a time when it's easy to go astray and to do what you think the church should be. So
That's
keep God first, like that saying from St. Augustine.
Most popular saying, like, you've made us for yourself, therefore our hearts are restless until we rest in you. Has become like the story of my life. So always rest your heart in the Lord and let him be your sort of guide through life. And not that you won't have any troubles, but you'll avoid the ultimate trouble.
Hey, Mike, thanks. Like as I would say here in Ireland, thanks a million. That was class. I had just a lot of things I think really stuck out. The fact that an EA Sports creative designer executive, becomes a youth minister going to daily mass. I think just that in itself is proof that God exists and he's living and he's really at work. And EA Sports is universal just because here in Europe, FIFA would be the most played game probably universally because FIFA is so massive here in Europe. So the lads here can definitely get an idea of what EA Sports is. And then in the States, obviously, all the Madden heads and everybody else, it's a big deal. So the fact that you were there and you still had that nagging, I think it's all wrapped up in what you said in the beginning, that you always had a soft spot for Our Lady and she never lets that go unanswered. The fact that you had a little soft spot and you had a little tenderness for her, she never forgot. So you can definitely see how she's been behind you and she's been slowly getting at you, and she brought you to her home, which since I've been in the home for the past 12 years, which providentially today's our 10-year anniversary of our like when we were approved in Rome as a congregation, I really feel like she has been working like that. She's been pulling people into her home with her delicacy, and it's absolutely beautiful to be a part of that. So I think there's so much there. We've got literally 5 minutes, so I just wanted to throw you this one question that one of the boys had. There were a lot of questions, but anyways, we'll throw you this one. So I mean, you only have like 4 minutes to answer, but yeah, here it is. A lecturer I had, so a teacher I had, said that addiction to video games and pornography have stolen a generation of men. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think it's a fair assessment.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think video games and addictions to that and to pornography, well, pornography has its own different set of challenges, but it's just it's a lack of maturation. Like you never, and that was sort of my problem looking back on it now. It was like I never grew up, you know. I never wanted to face, you know, any of the things that like an adult has to face. And um you know, when you're sitting on playing video games for 8 to 10 hours a day, yeah, it's going to impact you in a negative way. It's going to keep you immature. It's going to keep you sort of, you know, and those some companies, they are out to tantalize you with anything, whether it's with nudity or with violence. But you know, you only have to look at just how the games have evolved from like the original. I'll use this one as an example. Doom on the PC in like the early 90s was like some squares. You're like, oh my gosh, that's so violent. And then now if you play Doom, your head would explode. You know, it was just. But people get used to that, and you know, whether it's pornography or video games, it keeps ratcheting up a little bit more every time, and it just becomes this vicious cycle. So yeah, I would agree with your professor or your lecturer or whoever. But yeah, we if people have more questions, if the lads have more questions, I'd be happy to send you my email address, or you know, we can do this again more informally or formally, because I'd be happy to chat with all you guys.
Yeah, I actually think that's gonna have to happen because I did have there's a couple points that you actually said during your story. With just a couple of those would be massive because let's face it, I mean, like either it's your dream job, like you like the video games and you actually got it, but there's so many different ideas and dream jobs that the majority of the guys out here would have, and if only they could get it, and then once they get it, and it's always wanting more. And in your case, you were actually getting this. You were actually getting promoted. You were actually moving up, and you were getting everything that you quote unquote always wanted. And the fact that, like, I honestly believe it was our Blessed Mother pulled you out of there is in itself divine. And I think she did it for a reason because, you know, you can get guys when it's not too late. Like we said before, it's not bad, you know, and you get the career and you can provide. But as long as you're putting God in the center, because he himself said it's harder for a rich man to enter into heaven than a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. So use your imagination. It seems pretty hard. And obviously money drives so much, and money can be like, you know, our ideal, and it is dangerous. It is dangerous. But we'll have to follow up. We'll have to we'll have to do something because I think they're just seeing there are a lot of questions and there's a lot of interest. So we'll have to definitely shoot a nut for another time. I would keep going, but we have mass. Those sisters you were talking about were their chaplains now since the lockdown. So we're gonna have mass with them. But just to give you all a heads up as well, the Fireside is going to be changed. So we're not doing it on Wednesdays anymore. We're going to Mondays at 8:15. And please, for all you who are listening, get the word out because we're going to have Father Philip Morine on with us on Monday. So it's, you know, we were saying we had the EA Sports executive to like the, you know, the youth minister, daily mass goer, which is amazing. Father Philip also has an amazing transition. He was playing with David Beckham for Manchester United, and he became a Dominican priest. It's an absolutely amazing, it's an amazing story, and it's beautiful. And he's here in Cork with us. So he said he's going to come on Monday and he's going to give his testimony. So guys, get that word out, because just tell your buddies that this guy was playing with David Beckham, and that's enough. God just needs excuses. He got me on an excuse. I'm sure he got you as well, Mike. And that's all he needs is a little excuse. So if you just say, this guy was playing with David Beckham, Manchester United, and he's going to be live. Get him in there, and then they're going to see a Dominican priest, and he's going to tell the rest. I think it's going to be absolutely beautiful. So get it out. Get that apostolate out there with your friends, and it's going to do a lot of good. Mike, thanks so much. Like I said, we'll be in touch with you to try to get a recap, maybe even a part 2, which I would be excited to get. And thanks, guys, for watching. So we'll give you the blessing, and we'll see you on Monday, 8:15 Irish time. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
May Almighty God bless you. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.